The crying had not stopped for 3 hours and 17 minutes. Richard Whittaker pressed his forehead against the cold airplane window, his expensive navy suit wrinkled from holding his 6-month-old daughter Sophie against his chest. The baby's screams filled the first-class cabin like a siren that nobody could turn off. He had tried everything. The bottle. The pacifier. The special blanket. The gentle rocking that usually worked. The white noise app on his phone. Nothing helped. Around him, passengers were no longer hiding their anger. A woman in seat 2A had asked the flight attendant twice if there was anything that could be done. A businessman across the aisle kept sighing loudly, making his irritation clear. Richard felt their stares like needles on his skin. He was one of the youngest tech billionaires in America, a man who had built a company worth $3 billion before his 32nd birthday. He could solve complex coding problems that stumped entire teams. But right now he could not calm his own child. Sophie's tiny face was red and wet with tears. Her little fists punched the air as she wailed. Richard bounced her gently, whispering soothing words that she could not hear over her own cries. His arms ached. His head pounded. The flight attendants had stopped offering help after the first hour, their sympathetic smiles turning into tight-lipped concern. "Sir, some passengers are asking if you can take the baby to the back of the plane," a flight attendant named Jennifer said quietly, leaning down to his seat. Her voice was kind but firm. Richard looked up at her, his eyes bloodshot with exhaustion and stress. "I've been walking up and down the aisles. It doesn't help. She just keeps crying." Jennifer nodded. "I understand. It's a difficult situation for everyone." The words stung because they were true. Richard had never felt more helpless in his entire life. When his wife Lauren died during childbirth 6 months ago, he thought that was the worst moment he would ever experience. But this felt like a different kind of torture. The inability to comfort his daughter, combined with the judgment of 200 strangers, made him want to disappear. He stood up again, holding Sophie against his shoulder, and walked toward the back of the plane. Maybe the change of scenery would help. Maybe the sound of the engines was different back there. He was grasping at anything now, any small hope that might bring peace. As he passed through the curtain separating first class from economy, Richard noticed how different the atmosphere was. The seats were smaller, packed closer together. The passengers back here looked tired, many of them wearing headphones or trying to sleep despite the noise. He felt a fresh wave of guilt. These people had paid less for their tickets, and now they had to listen to his daughter scream. He walked slowly down the narrow aisle, bouncing Sophie and murmuring to her. Her cries seemed to get louder, echoing off the walls of the plane. Richard saw a mother cover her young son's ears. An elderly man frowned at him. A college student turned up the volume on her movie. Then he saw her. A young African-American girl, maybe 16 or 17 years old, sitting in a middle seat near the back. She wore a bright green sweater that looked handmade, and her hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail. While everyone else around her looked annoyed or uncomfortable, she was watching him with an expression of pure concentration. Her dark eyes followed Sophie's movements, and her lips moved slightly as if she was counting something. Richard kept walking, but the girl stood up suddenly, stepping into the aisle. She was tall and slim, with an open face that radiated intelligence and kindness. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice clear and confident despite her youth. "I think I can help with your baby." Richard stopped, surprised. He had received many looks from passengers, but nobody had offered to help in hours. "I appreciate that, but I've tried everything. She's been crying since we left London." The girl nodded. "I know. I've been listening. But I noticed something about her crying pattern. May I try something? It's based on mathematical rhythms and frequencies. I promise I won't hurt her." Richard stared at this stranger, this teenager in economy class who claimed she could solve his problem with math. Every rational part of his brain told him it was nonsense. But desperation has a way of opening doors that logic keeps closed. "Okay," he said simply. "Please. Try anything." The girl smiled, and it was like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. "My name is Naomi Johnson. Can I hold her?" Richard hesitated for only a second before passing Sophie to this stranger. The baby's cries actually got louder at the transfer, and Richard saw several passengers lean forward to watch what was happening. Naomi took Sophie with practiced ease, cradling her in a specific position that Richard had not tried. She began to move immediately, but not in the random rocking motion that most people used. Instead, her movements were precise and rhythmic, following a pattern that seemed almost mathematical. 1 2 3 pause. 1 2 3 pause. She swayed her hips in time with the motion, creating a gentle pendulum effect. Then she started humming. The sound was low and melodic, but there was something calculated about it. She was hitting specific notes at specific intervals. The humming mixed with a quiet tapping that her fingers made against Sophie's back. Tap tap tap. Pause. Tap tap tap. Pause. Richard watched, holding his breath. Sophie's cries were still loud, but they seemed to falter slightly, as if the baby was confused by these new sensations. Naomi kept going, her eyes closed now, completely focused on the rhythm she was creating. The tapping continued. The humming continued. The swaying continued. Everything worked together like a complex equation designed to produce one specific result. 30 seconds passed. Sophie's cries became slightly quieter. Naomi adjusted her humming, changing the frequency just a little bit. The tapping pattern shifted, becoming faster. 1 minute passed. Sophie's cries turned into gasping sobs. Naomi opened her eyes and looked down at the baby with such gentleness that Richard felt his throat tighten with emotion. "You're okay, little one," Naomi whispered between hums. "You're safe. You're loved. Everything is okay." 2 minutes passed. Sophie's sobs became hiccups. The entire back section of the plane had gone quiet, passengers watching this scene unfold with amazement. Naomi kept swaying, kept tapping, kept humming her mathematical lullaby. 3 minutes passed. Sophie's hiccups slowed. Her tiny body, which had been rigid with distress, started to relax against Naomi's chest. 4 minutes passed. Sophie stopped crying. The silence that followed was so complete that Richard could hear his own heartbeat. Sophie's eyes, which had been squeezed shut for hours, opened slowly. She looked up at Naomi's face with an expression of perfect calm. Then, incredibly, she smiled. A real, genuine baby smile that showed her 2 new teeth. The passengers around them burst into applause. Richard felt tears stream down his face, and he did not try to hide them. This stranger, this teenage girl from economy class, had done what he could not do. She had given his daughter peace. Have you ever felt completely helpless, like nothing you did would ever be enough? If this story touches your heart, please subscribe to see how Naomi's kindness changes everything. Comment below and tell us about a time when a stranger helped you in an unexpected way. Your story might inspire someone who needs hope today. Naomi continued her rhythmic movements for another 5 minutes, gradually slowing the pace as Sophie drifted into sleep. Richard stood frozen in the aisle, watching this miracle unfold in front of him. Other passengers whispered to each other, their earlier annoyance replaced with curiosity and admiration. Finally, Naomi stopped humming and looked up at Richard. "She's asleep now," she said quietly. "We should probably get her back to your seat so she stays comfortable." Richard nodded, unable to speak at first. He cleared his throat. "How did you do that? What was that technique?" Naomi smiled as she carefully transferred the sleeping baby back to Richard's arms. "It's something I figured out by combining several concepts. Babies respond to patterns and rhythms because that's what they experienced in the womb. The mother's heartbeat, her movements, her voice, they all follow mathematical patterns. When a baby is distressed, they need those patterns re-established to feel safe again." They began walking back toward first class, Richard moving slowly to avoid waking Sophie. "But how did you know which patterns to use?" he asked. "I was listening to her crying for the past 3 hours, Naomi explained. "Crying has rhythm too. Each baby has their own unique pattern based on their breathing rate, their size, their temperament. I counted the intervals between her breaths, measured the pitch variations in her cries, and calculated the frequency that would be most calming for her specifically. Then I created a counter rhythm that would gradually slow down her distress response." Richard stared at her. "You did all of that just by listening? In your head?" Naomi shrugged, looking a bit embarrassed. "Numbers make sense to me. They always have. I see patterns where other people see chaos. It's just how my brain works." They reached the curtain to first class and Richard paused. "Please come sit with me. I need to talk to you properly. I need to thank you properly." Naomi glanced back at her seat in economy. "I don't think I'm allowed in first class. My ticket was for economy." "I'm inviting you," Richard said firmly. "The flight attendants won't have a problem with it. Please. I insist." Naomi hesitated, then nodded. "Okay. Thank you." They settled into Richard's spacious first-class seats. Sophie remained asleep in his arms, her breathing deep and steady. The other first-class passengers looked at Naomi with interest and gratitude. Jennifer, the flight attendant, came over immediately. "Can I get you anything, miss?" she asked Naomi warmly. "Food? Drinks? We're so grateful for what you did." Naomi looked uncertain. Maybe just some water?" "Bring her whatever she wants," Richard said. and charge it to my account. Anything she wants for the rest of the flight. Jennifer smiled. Of course, sir. And miss, we have salmon, chicken, or vegetarian pasta for dinner. You missed the meal service in economy. The pasta sounds great, Naomi said. Thank you so much. After Jennifer left, Richard turned to Naomi. Tell me about yourself. What were you doing in London? Are you traveling alone? Naomi settled into the comfortable leather seat, clearly not used to such luxury. She wore simple clothes, the green sweater and a pair of worn jeans, but she carried herself with quiet confidence. I was at an international mathematics competition. It was held at Cambridge University. I got a scholarship to participate, but it only covered the competition fees and basic accommodation. I had to save for months to afford the plane ticket. An international mathematics competition, Richard repeated. At 16? I just turned 17 last week, Naomi corrected. But yes, I've been competing since I was 13. Math is my thing. It's the only subject where I feel like I really understand everything. Richard noticed the way her eyes lit up when she talked about mathematics. Did you do well at the competition? Naomi's smile grew wider. I came in second place overall. First place went to a graduate student from MIT, so I feel pretty good about second. Second place in an international competition against graduate students? Richard felt his respect for this young woman grow even deeper. That's extraordinary. Where do you go to school? Jefferson High School on the south side of Chicago, Naomi said. Her voice was proud but matter-of-fact. It's not fancy, but we have a good math teacher who recognized my abilities and helped me apply for these opportunities. Mrs. Patterson has been amazing. She wrote all my recommendation letters and helped me find scholarships. And your parents? Are they supportive of your gift? Naomi's expression became more guarded. It's just my mom, my little brother Jerome, and me. My dad died when I was 8. Mom works 3 jobs to keep us afloat. She cleans offices at night, works retail during the day, and does weekend shifts at a nursing home. She's incredible. She wants me to have opportunities she never had. Richard heard the love and admiration in Naomi's voice. 3 jobs. That must be difficult for all of you. We manage, Naomi said simply. Mom always says that hard work and kindness will open doors. And she's right. People have been kind to us. Teachers, neighbors, even strangers. That's why I wanted to help with your baby. I know what it feels like to be overwhelmed and need someone to step in. Jennifer returned with a tray of food and drinks. Naomi's eyes widened at the presentation, the real silverware and cloth napkin. This looks amazing, she said. Thank you. As Naomi ate, Richard watched Sophie sleep peacefully in his arms. The baby's face was relaxed, her tiny fingers curled against his chest. He thought about the past 6 months, about all the challenges of being a single father while running a major company. He had nannies and assistants and every resource money could buy, but none of that had helped today. This teenager with nothing but her brilliant mind and kind heart had succeeded where everyone else failed. Naomi, he said carefully, I want to help you. What you did today, it was more than just calming a crying baby. You showed extraordinary intelligence and compassion. Those are rare qualities. I'd like to do something to thank you properly. Naomi looked up from her pasta, surprised. You don't need to do anything. I was happy to help. That's what people should do for each other. I understand that, Richard said. But I'm in a position to make a real difference in your life and I'd like to do that. Please let me help. Not as payment, but as gratitude and recognition of your remarkable abilities. Naomi set down her fork, studying his face. What kind of help? I don't know yet, Richard admitted. But I'd like to stay in touch. Learn more about your goals and dreams. See if there are opportunities one can provide. I run a technology company called Whitaker Systems. We're always looking for brilliant minds. Maybe there's a way for us to support your education or provide mentorship. Naomi was quiet for a moment. Richard could see her thinking, weighing his offer carefully. Finally she spoke. My mom always taught me not to refuse kindness when it's freely given. She says pride has no place when someone genuinely wants to help. So yes, I would be grateful for any support you can offer. Thank you, Mr. Whitaker. Call me Richard, he said, smiling. And you're very welcome. Can we exchange contact information? I'd like to follow up on this conversation once we're back in the States. They spent the rest of the flight talking. Richard learned that Naomi dreamed of attending MIT or Stanford, that she wanted to work in artificial intelligence and machine learning, that she loved reading science fiction and playing chess with her brother. Naomi learned that Richard had built his company from nothing, that he had been married to his college sweetheart, that Sophie was the light of his life even though raising her alone terrified him sometimes. By the time the plane landed at Chicago O'Hare Airport, Richard felt like he had made a genuine connection with this extraordinary young woman. As they gathered their belongings and prepared to disembark, he turned to her one more time. "Thank you again, Naomi. For everything. I mean that with all my heart." Naomi smiled, slinging her worn backpack over her shoulder. "You're welcome, Richard. Take good care of Sophie. She's a special little girl." "Wait," Richard said as she started to walk away. "Let me at least give you a ride." "Where are you headed?" "I'm taking the train home," Naomi said. "It's fine. I do it all the time." "Please," Richard insisted. "My car is picking me up. We can drop you wherever you need to go." "It's the least I can do." Naomi looked at him, then smiled and nodded. "Okay, thank you. That would actually be really helpful. The train takes forever." As they walked through the airport together, Richard carrying Sophie in her car seat and Naomi beside him with her backpack, he had no idea that this chance meeting on a plane would change both of their lives forever. Richard's driver, a kind man named Thomas, was waiting at the arrivals area with a sign. When he saw Richard with the baby and a teenage girl, his eyebrows rose slightly, but he maintained his professional composure. "Good evening, Mr. Whitaker," Thomas said, taking the car seat from Richard. "Shall I help with the luggage?" "Please," Richard replied. "Thomas, this is Naomi Johnson. She'll be riding with us. We're dropping her home first." Thomas smiled at Naomi. "Welcome, Miss Johnson. Let me get the door for you." The car was a sleek black Mercedes, spacious and comfortable. Naomi slid into the back seat, looking around at the leather interior and advanced technology with wide eyes. Richard got in beside her, adjusting Sophie's car seat between them. "Where are we headed?" Thomas asked from the driver's seat. Naomi gave him an address on the south side. Richard noticed Thomas glance in the rearview mirror, a flicker of concern crossing his face. The south side had rough neighborhoods, areas where his kind of car would stand out. But Thomas said nothing, simply entered the address into the GPS. As they pulled away from the airport, Richard turned to Naomi. "So tell me more about this math competition. What kind of problems were you solving?" Naomi's face lit up again. "Oh, they were incredible. One of them involved calculating optimal network paths through a constantly changing system. Another dealt with probability distributions and quantum states. My favorite was a problem about finding patterns in what looked like random data. That's where I really excelled." "Finding patterns in chaos," Richard mused. "That's essentially what you did with Sophie today." "Exactly," Naomi agreed. "Most people think crying is random, but it's not. Everything in nature follows patterns. You just have to know how to look for them." They talked about mathematics, about patterns and algorithms and the beauty of numbers. Richard found himself genuinely engaged in the conversation, something that rarely happened outside of work. Naomi had a way of explaining complex concepts that made them accessible without dumbing them down. She respected his intelligence while sharing her knowledge generously. Sophie woke up about halfway through the drive, but instead of crying, she simply looked around with curious eyes. Naomi noticed immediately and began playing a simple game with her, holding up different numbers of fingers and counting softly. Sophie watched, mesmerized. "She likes you," Richard observed. "Babies can sense energy," Naomi said. "If you're calm and genuine, they respond to that. My mom used to say that children and animals are the best judges of character because they haven't learned to lie yet." "Your mother sounds very wise." "She is," Naomi said softly. "She's had a hard life, but she never became bitter. She always chooses kindness. Always sees the good in people. I try to be like her." The car entered Naomi's neighborhood, and Richard saw what Thomas had been concerned about. The buildings were old and worn, many with broken windows or graffiti on the walls. Groups of young men stood on corners, watching the expensive car drive past. But Richard also saw other things. Community gardens where neighbors grew vegetables together, a newly painted mural celebrating local heroes, children playing basketball in a well-maintained court, elderly people sitting on porches and chatting. "It's not as bad as it looks," Naomi said, noticing Richard's observation. "The media only shows the violence and poverty, but there's so much good here too. People look out for each other. We have community, real community. That's worth more than fancy buildings." Richard nodded, feeling slightly ashamed of his automatic judgments. "You're absolutely right. I apologize for any assumptions I made." "Don't apologize," Naomi said. "Just remember that zip codes don't define worth. Some of the smartest, kindest, most resilient people I know live right here." Thomas pulled up in front of a small apartment building. The building was old but clean, with flower boxes in some windows and a well-swept entrance. Naomi gathered her backpack and opened the car door. "Thank you for the ride," she said. "And thank you for the conversation. It was really nice talking to someone who understands complex mathematics." Richard made a quick decision. "Wait, can I come in for a moment? I'd like to meet your mother. Is that okay?" Naomi looked surprised. "You want to meet my mom? Why?" "Because I told you I wanted to help and I meant it. But I think any support should go through her. She's your parent. She should be part of any decisions." Naomi smiled, looking touched. "That's really respectful." "Okay, yes. She should be home from her day job by now. Come on up." Thomas stayed with the car and Sophie while Richard followed Naomi into the building. They climbed 3 flights of stairs, the stairwell smelling of cooking food and cleaning products. Naomi unlocked the door to apartment 3B and called out as they entered. "Mom, I'm home. And I brought someone to meet you." The apartment was small but immaculately clean. The furniture was old but well cared for. Family photos covered one wall, showing Naomi and a younger boy at various ages, always smiling. School awards and certificates decorated another wall, most of them with Naomi's name on them. A woman emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She was in her late 30s, wearing a bright red dress that looked like a work uniform. She had the same warm eyes as Naomi, the same intelligent face, but there were lines of exhaustion around her eyes and mouth. "Mom, this is Richard Whitaker," Naomi said. "I helped him with his baby on the plane and he gave me a ride home." The woman looked at Richard, taking in his expensive suit and watch, then back at her daughter. "Helped with his baby how?" she asked carefully. Richard stepped forward, offering his hand. "Mrs. Johnson, I'm so glad to meet you. Your daughter saved my sanity today. My daughter Sophie cried for 3 hours on the plane and nothing I did helped." Naomi used her mathematical knowledge to calm her down in minutes. "It was the most extraordinary thing I've ever witnessed." Mrs. Johnson shook his hand, her grip firm despite her small stature. "That sounds like Naomi. She's always been good with patterns and rhythms. Used to calm her baby brother the same way when he had colic." She turned to her daughter. "You won second place, didn't you? I can see it in your face." "Second place out of 200 competitors," Naomi said proudly. "From 47 countries." Mrs. Johnson pulled her daughter into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you, baby. So proud." Richard watched this exchange, seeing the deep love between mother and daughter. After a moment, Mrs. Johnson stepped back and looked at him directly. "Mr. Whitaker, why are you really here? I appreciate the ride home, but men like you don't usually come to neighborhoods like this unless they want something." Her directness surprised and impressed Richard. "You're right to be cautious. I'm here because I want to help Naomi. She has extraordinary talent, the kind that should be nurtured and supported. I run a technology company and I've seen thousands of smart people. Your daughter is different. She's special. I'd like to offer her opportunities, mentorship, maybe scholarship support for college." Mrs. Johnson studied his face for a long moment. "What do you want in return?" "Nothing," Richard said honestly. "Just the satisfaction of helping someone who deserves it. Look, Mrs. Johnson, I'm a billionaire. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. But today I couldn't solve a simple problem. I couldn't calm my own child. Your daughter did that with nothing but her mind and her kindness. That's worth more than all the money in the world. Let me pay that forward." Mrs. Johnson was quiet, thinking. Finally she spoke. "Naomi, what do you think? Do you want this man's help?" Naomi looked at Richard, then at her mother. "Yes, Mom. I think he's genuine. And you always say not to refuse help when it's offered with an open heart." Mrs. Johnson nodded slowly. "Okay. But Mr. Whitaker, I want everything in writing. Clear expectations, clear boundaries. My daughter is brilliant, but she's also young. I need to protect her." "Absolutely," Richard agreed. "I'll have my lawyers draw up everything properly. You can have your own lawyer review it. I want you to be comfortable with every aspect of this arrangement." "We can't afford a lawyer," Mrs. Johnson said bluntly. "I'll pay for one," Richard said. "An independent lawyer who works for you, not me. Someone who can make sure your interests are protected." For the first time Mrs. Johnson smiled. "You might actually be for real. Okay, Mr. Whitaker. Let's talk specifics. What exactly are you offering?" They sat down at the small kitchen table and Richard outlined his thoughts. First, he wanted to provide Naomi with immediate support for her educational expenses. Books, supplies, competition fees, travel costs. Second, he wanted to offer her a part-time position at his company, working with his research and development team on weekends and summer breaks. Third, he wanted to set up a college fund that would cover tuition, room, and board at any university she chose. That's too much, Mrs. Johnson said, shaking her head. We can't accept all that. Why not? Richard asked gently. I can afford it easily. And Naomi will earn every penny through her work and her brilliance. This isn't charity. It's investment in an exceptional mind. Mrs. Johnson looked at her daughter. Naomi reached across the table and took her mother's hand. Mom, let him help. Please. This could change everything for us. For Jerome too. Jerome? Richard asked. My little brother, Naomi explained. He's 12. He's smart too, just in different ways. He's amazing with people, with words. He wants to be a writer. Richard made another quick decision. What if I set up a similar educational fund for Jerome? Not as much, since he's younger and we don't know his path yet, but something to ensure he has options too. Mrs. Johnson's eyes filled with tears. She pressed her hand to her mouth, overwhelmed. Naomi moved to her mother's side, wrapping her arms around her. It's okay, Mom, Naomi whispered. It's okay to accept help. You've been so strong for so long. Let someone help us for once. Mrs. Johnson took a deep breath, wiping her eyes. Okay. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Whitaker. Thank you so much. I don't know how to repay this kindness. You don't need to repay it, Richard said. Just let your children thrive. That's all the payment I need. They talked for another hour, working out details and exchanging contact information. Jerome came home from a friend's house, a bright-eyed boy with his mother's smile and his sister's intelligence. He was shy around Richard at first but warmed up when Richard asked about his writing. Finally, Richard stood to leave. I'll have my assistant contact you next week to set everything up properly. In the meantime, here's my direct number. If you need anything at all, please call me. At the door, Naomi hugged him unexpectedly. Thank you, Richard. You have no idea what this means to us. I think I do, Richard said softly. And you're welcome. As he walked back down the stairs to the car, Richard felt something he had not felt since Lauren died. Purpose beyond just work and survival. Helping this family felt right. It felt like the beginning of something important. 3 weeks later, Richard sat in the audience at the Chicago Mathematics Institute, watching Naomi compete in the National High School Championship. He had brought Sophie with him, along with her nanny Maria, a warm Filipino woman in her 50s who had been invaluable in the months since Lauren's death. The auditorium was packed with students, teachers, and parents. On stage, 10 finalists sat at individual desks, each with a tablet and stylus for solving problems. Naomi wore a bright blue blouse that her mother had bought specifically for this occasion. She looked calm and focused, her hands steady as the moderator read the first problem. Richard watched the problem appear on the large screen. A complex equation involving differential calculus and probability theory. The other competitors immediately began scribbling furiously on their tablets. Naomi stared at the problem for what seemed like forever, not writing anything. Richard felt his stomach tighten with concern. Then Naomi smiled, a small, confident smile. She began writing smoothly, her stylus moving in confident strokes across the tablet. While other students were still working through preliminary calculations, Naomi was already writing her final answer. She hit submit and sat back, waiting. The moderator checked his screen and his eyes widened. We have our first correct answer. Competitor number 7, Naomi Johnson, in 2 minutes and 37 seconds. That's a new record for this problem. The audience applauded. Richard found himself grinning, proud in a way that surprised him. Beside him, Maria bounced Sophie gently and whispered, "That girl is special, sir. Very special." The competition continued for 2 hours. Problem after problem appeared, each more difficult than the last. Some involved pure mathematics, others required applied thinking about real-world scenarios. Naomi consistently finished first or second, her answers always correct, her methods always elegant and efficient. When the final scores were calculated, the moderator approached the microphone with visible excitement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a clear winner today, and she's broken multiple records in the process. With a perfect score and the fastest average completion time in the 20-year history of this championship, please congratulate Naomi Johnson from Jefferson High School." The auditorium erupted in applause. Naomi stood looking shocked and delighted. Her mother, sitting in the front row, was crying openly. Jerome was jumping up and down, shouting his sister's name. Richard stood and clapped, balancing Sophie on his hip. The baby seemed to sense the excitement and clapped her tiny hands too. After the ceremony, Richard made his way to where Naomi stood with her family and her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, a middle-aged black woman with gray-streaked hair and a warm smile. "Congratulations," Richard said, offering his hand to Naomi. "That was absolutely incredible." "Thank you," Naomi said, still glowing with happiness. "I can't believe I actually won. And broke records. This is crazy." "You deserved every bit of it," Mrs. Patterson said, beaming at her student. "Naomi, I've taught for 30 years and I've never had a student with your gift. You're going to do amazing things." Mrs. Johnson introduced Richard to Mrs. Patterson, explaining how they had met. Mrs. Patterson listened with interest, nodding thoughtfully. "Mr. Whitaker, I'm glad Naomi has found a mentor like you," Mrs. Patterson said. "She needs someone who understands what it means to be exceptional. It can be isolating being the smartest person in the room all the time. Naomi needs peers and mentors who can challenge her and appreciate her mind." "That's exactly what I want to provide," Richard agreed. "Speaking of which, I have a proposal." Everyone turned to look at him. Richard smiled and continued. "Naomi, I'd like to invite you to attend Rosewood Academy next year for your senior year. It's one of the best private schools in the country, and they have an extraordinary mathematics and science program. I've already spoken to the admissions director. They would be honored to have you." Naomi's mouth fell open. "Rosewood Academy? That's where the governor's kids go. Where senators' kids go. I could never afford that." "Full scholarship," Richard said. "Tuition, books, supplies, everything. And it includes a stipend for your family to offset the income you'd lose by not working after school. I know you help your mother with expenses. This way she won't suffer financially from your education." Mrs. Johnson put her hand over her heart. "Mr. Whitaker, this is too much. This is more than too much." "It's not enough," Richard said sincerely. "Mrs. Johnson, your daughter just broke multiple national records. She's competing at levels most graduate students can't reach. She deserves the best education possible. Please let me do this. I want to see how far Naomi can go when she has every resource available to her." Naomi looked at her mother, her eyes pleading. Mrs. Johnson looked at Mrs. Patterson, who nodded encouragingly. Finally she looked back at Richard. "Okay," she said softly. "Yes, we accept. Thank you, Mr. Whitaker. I don't have words for how grateful we are." Richard smiled. "You just said them. Now I have one more thing. This is for immediate needs." He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket and handed it to Mrs. Johnson. "This should cover your current bills and give you some breathing room. It's not a loan. It's a gift, no strings attached. Use it however you need to." Mrs. Johnson opened the envelope and gasped. Inside was a check for $50,000. Her hands shook as she looked at the numbers. "I can't accept this. This is too much money." "Mom, please," Naomi said quietly. "Think about what this means. You can quit one of your jobs. You can rest. You can spend time with us. Please accept it." Mrs. Johnson looked at her children, her eyes brimming with tears. Jerome took her hand and Naomi put her arm around her mother's shoulders. Finally Mrs. Johnson nodded. "Okay, thank you. Thank you so much." Richard spent the rest of the afternoon with the Johnson family, getting to know them better. They went out for a celebration dinner at a nice restaurant, Richard's Treat. Jerome talked excitedly about the book he was writing, a science fiction story about kids with superpowers who used math to save the world. Naomi discussed the courses she wanted to take at Rosewood. Mrs. Johnson slowly relaxed, letting herself enjoy the moment without constantly worrying about money. Sophie was passed around the table, charming everyone with her giggles and smiles. She seemed particularly attached to Naomi, reaching for her whenever she was within sight. Richard watched these interactions with growing warmth. His daughter, who had cried for hours just weeks ago, was now laughing in the arms of the young woman who had saved both of them that day. After dinner, Richard drove them home in his car. Thomas had the night off, so Richard drove himself, enjoying the normalcy of it. When they pulled up to the apartment building, Naomi turned to him from the back seat. "Richard, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Anything. Why are you really doing all this? And please be honest. I need to understand." Richard thought carefully before answering. He turned in his seat so he could look at all three Johnsons. "When my wife died, I thought my life was over in every way that mattered. I had Sophie and I loved her with everything in me, but I couldn't see past the grief. I was just going through the motions, surviving but not really living. Then on that plane, when I couldn't help my own daughter, I felt like the biggest failure in the world." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Then you appeared, Naomi. And you did something I couldn't do. You showed me that sometimes the most important help comes from unexpected places. You reminded me that kindness and intelligence and genuine human connection matter more than money or status or any of the things I'd been focused on. You gave me hope again. You gave me purpose. Helping your family isn't charity. It's gratitude. It's me paying forward the gift you gave me. The car was quiet for a moment. Then Mrs. Johnson spoke. That's the most honest answer anyone has ever given me. Thank you, Richard. You're a good man. I try to be, Richard said. My wife would have loved you all. She always said that goodness recognizes goodness. She was right. Over the following weeks, Richard and the Johnsons became close. He visited their apartment regularly, sometimes bringing Sophie, sometimes coming alone to work with Naomi on mathematical problems or to discuss business concepts. He helped Jerome with his writing, introducing him to authors and providing feedback on his stories. He convinced Mrs. Johnson to quit her night job, arguing that she needed to take care of her own health so she could continue taking care of her children. The paperwork for Rosewood Academy was completed, and Naomi was officially enrolled for the fall semester. Richard also set up her part-time position at Whitaker Systems, where she would work 10 hours a week during the school year and full-time during summers. The salary was generous, far more than she would make at a typical teenage job, but Richard insisted it was fair compensation for the value she would bring to his company. One evening, Richard brought Naomi to Whitaker Systems headquarters to show her where she'd be working. The building was a gleaming tower of glass and steel in downtown Chicago, with views of the lake from every floor. Naomi stared up at it with wide eyes. "This is where I'll work?" she asked. 15th floor, Richard confirmed. The Research and Development Department. You'll be working with some of the smartest people in the industry. They're all excited to meet you. I showed them your competition performances and they were blown away. They took the elevator up, Sophie sleeping in her carrier on Richard's chest. The R&D floor was buzzing with activity even though it was after regular business hours. Engineers and programmers worked at various stations, discussing projects and running simulations. Richard introduced Naomi to the team. There was Dr. Lisa Patel, the head of artificial intelligence research, a brilliant Indian-American woman in her 40s who immediately started discussing complex algorithms with Naomi. There was Kevin Torres, a young Latino programmer who had developed some of the company's most successful applications. There was Dr. James Harrison, an older white man who specialized in machine learning and seemed delighted to have such a young prodigy joining the team. "We've been working on a pattern recognition system for autonomous vehicles," Dr. Patel explained, showing Naomi the code on her screen. "We're trying to improve the accuracy of predicting pedestrian movement. The current system is good, but it fails in chaotic situations where multiple people are moving in different directions." Naomi leaned in, studying the code. After a moment, she pointed to a specific section. "You're treating each person as an independent variable, but human movement in crowds follows collective patterns. You need to factor in social physics, the mathematical principles that govern group behavior. There's a formula developed by Dirk Helbing that might help. It treats pedestrians like particles in a fluid, accounting for repulsive and attractive forces." Dr. Patel stared at her, then at the screen, then back at Naomi. "That's brilliant. Why didn't we think of that? Kevin, pull up the Helbing model. Let's see if we can integrate it." Richard watched with pride as Naomi jumped into the work, her suggestions sparking new ideas and approaches. She was not intimidated by these adults with their advanced degrees and years of experience. She was their peer, their equal, and they recognized it immediately. After 2 hours of intense collaboration, Richard finally said they needed to leave so Naomi could get home at a reasonable hour. The team was disappointed but understanding. Dr. Patel hugged Naomi before she left. "I can't wait until you officially start," Dr. Patel said. "You're going to be such an asset to this team." In the car on the way home, Naomi was glowing with excitement. "That was amazing. They were working on real problems, important problems. And they listened to me. They actually valued my input." "Why wouldn't they?" Richard asked. "You're brilliant, Naomi. You belong in that room with them. You belong anywhere you want to be." Naomi was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "My whole life I've been the weird kid who was too smart for her own good. Teachers didn't know what to do with me. Other students thought I was showing off. But here with you and your team I'm just normal. It's the best feeling in the world." Richard glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "You're not normal, Naomi. You're exceptional. But you're finally in an environment where exceptional is celebrated instead of isolated. That's what I want for you. That's what everyone should have." When they reached her apartment, Naomi paused before getting out of the car. "Richard, I just want you to know that you've changed my life. Not just with the money and the opportunities but with the way you see me. You see who I really am. Thank you for that. Thank you for letting me be part of your journey, Richard replied. Now go get some rest. You have school tomorrow. As he drove home with sleeping Sophie in the back seat, Richard felt happier than he had in months. Helping Naomi and her family was filling a void he did not even realize he had. It was giving him purpose beyond just work and parenting. It was reminding him that life could still hold joy and meaning, even after terrible loss. He did not know it yet, but this was just the beginning. The connection between him and Naomi would grow deeper and more complicated in ways neither of them could predict. But for now, in this moment, everything felt right. Everything felt like it was exactly as it should be. The first day of school at Rosewood Academy was overwhelming in the best possible way. Richard picked up Naomi early that morning, knowing she was nervous. When she came down from her apartment, she wore the new school uniform, a crisp white blouse and a green plaid skirt with a matching blazer. Her hair was styled neatly, and she carried a brand new backpack filled with supplies that Richard had provided. "You look perfect," Richard said as she got into the car. "I feel like I'm pretending to be someone I'm not," Naomi admitted. "Everyone at this school is going to be rich and connected. I'm just a girl from the South Side." "You're a national champion mathematician," Richard corrected. "You're a researcher at a major tech company. You're brilliant and kind and resilient. Those other kids should be nervous about measuring up to you." Naomi smiled, some of her anxiety easing. "Thanks, Richard. I needed that." Sophie was in her car seat, now 9 months old and babbling happily. She reached for Naomi, who took her hand and played a finger game that made the baby giggle. Richard watched them in the rearview mirror, his heart warm. Rosewood Academy was located in an exclusive suburb, the campus sprawling and beautiful with historic buildings and modern facilities. When Richard pulled up to the entrance, students were arriving in expensive cars, many dropped off by uniformed drivers. Naomi's eyes widened at the scene. "It's okay," Richard said gently. "You belong here just as much as anyone else. Remember that." The principal, Dr. Catherine Brooks, was waiting at the entrance to greet new students. She was a tall white woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. When she saw Richard and Naomi approaching, her professional smile became genuine. "Mr. Whitaker, welcome. And this must be Naomi. We're so honored to have you at Rosewood." "Thank you, Dr. Brooks," Naomi said, shaking her hand. "I'm excited to be here." "Your test scores and competition results are extraordinary," Dr. Brooks continued. "Our mathematics department is particularly thrilled. Mr. Feldman, our advanced math teacher, has been preparing special materials just for you." They walked into the school together, Dr. Brooks giving them a quick tour. The facilities were impressive. State-of-the-art science labs, a library with thousands of books and computers, art studios with professional equipment, a theater that could seat hundreds. Everything was clean, modern, and obviously expensive. Other students stared at Naomi as they passed, some curious, some welcoming, a few with expressions that were harder to read. Naomi held her head high, trying to project confidence she did not entirely feel. At Naomi's locker, they found a welcome package waiting. A school handbook, a tablet loaded with digital textbooks, and a handwritten note from the principal welcoming her personally. Richard helped her organize her books, then walked her to her first class, Advanced Placement Calculus. "You're going to be amazing," Richard said at the classroom door. "If you need anything at all, text me. I'm here for you." "Thank you," Naomi said, hugging him quickly. "Say bye to Sophie for me." Richard left, and Naomi entered the classroom. About 20 students were already seated, most of them white or Asian, all of them looking polished and comfortable in their uniforms. A few heads turned when she walked in, but most students continued their conversations. Naomi found an empty seat near the back and sat down, pulling out her tablet. A moment later, a girl with long black hair and warm brown skin slid into the seat beside her. "Hi, I'm Priya Gupta," the girl said with a friendly smile. She wore the same uniform but had added small gold earrings and a delicate bracelet. "You're new, right? I haven't seen you before." "Yeah, I'm Naomi Johnson. This is my first day." "Welcome to Rosewood," Priya said. "What year are you?" "Senior." "Me too." "Where did you transfer from?" "Jefferson High on the South Side." Priya's eyebrows rose. "Wow, that's quite a change. What brought you to Rosewood?" Before Naomi could answer, the teacher entered. Mr. Feldman was a short, energetic white man in his 50s with wild gray hair and bright eyes behind thick glasses. He wore a bright red bow tie with his button-up shirt. "Good morning, brilliant minds," he said cheerfully. Welcome to your senior year of calculus. I promise to challenge you, frustrate you, and ultimately help you fall in love with mathematics. For those who don't know me, I'm Mr. Feldman and I've been teaching math here for 23 years. I never get tired of it because math never gets old. He looked around the classroom, his gaze landing on Naomi. And we have a new student today. Miss Johnson, would you like to introduce yourself? Naomi stood, feeling all eyes on her. Hi, I'm Naomi. I just transferred here from Jefferson High. I'm really interested in mathematics, especially applied mathematics and pattern recognition. I'm looking forward to learning from all of you. Ah yes, Mr. Feldman said, his eyes twinkling. Our national champion. Class, Naomi won the National High School Mathematics Championship last month with a perfect score and record-breaking times. She's also working as a researcher at Whittaker Systems, one of the top tech companies in the country. We're very lucky to have her. The class murmured with interest. A few students looked impressed, others skeptical. A white boy in the front row raised his hand. If you're already working at a tech company, why bother with high school? He asked, not rudely but genuinely curious. Because there's always more to learn, Naomi replied. And because community matters. Learning with other people is different from learning alone. It's better. Mr. Feldman beamed at her. Excellent answer, Miss Johnson. Now let's begin today's lesson. We're going to explore differential equations and their applications in real-world systems. The class flew by. Mr. Feldman's teaching style was engaging and rigorous, challenging students to think beyond formulas and understand the underlying principles. Naomi found herself genuinely engaged, asking questions and contributing to discussions. By the end of the period, several students had approached her to continue conversations about specific problems. Priya walked with Naomi to her next class. That was impressive in there. You really know your stuff. Thanks, Naomi said. I love math. It's kind of my thing. Kind of. Priya laughed. National champion seems like more than kind of. So how did you end up at Rosewood? Scholarship. Naomi hesitated, unsure how much to share. Yeah, scholarship. I was lucky enough to catch the attention of someone who believed in my potential. The rest of the day followed a similar pattern. Each class was challenging and engaging. Teachers were supportive and knowledgeable. Students were mostly friendly, though Naomi could sense some social hierarchies and cliques that would take time to navigate. By lunch, she was mentally exhausted but exhilarated. Priya invited her to sit with her group at lunch. The cafeteria was nothing like Jefferson High, with multiple food stations offering fresh, healthy options. Naomi got a salad and a sandwich, then followed Priya to a table where 3 other students sat. Everyone, this is Naomi, Priya said. Naomi, this is Tyler, Michelle, and Andre. Tyler was a white boy with shaggy blonde hair and a lacrosse jersey. Michelle was an Asian American girl with short hair and paint stains on her blazer. Andre was a black boy with glasses and a confident smile. They all greeted Naomi warmly. So you're the math genius? Andre said. That's cool. I'm more of a history guy myself, but I respect the talent. What do you want to study in college? Michelle asked. Artificial intelligence and machine learning, Naomi replied. I'm interested in how we can use mathematics to teach computers to recognize patterns and make decisions. That's ambitious, Tyler said. Where are you applying? MIT is my top choice, but I'm also looking at Stanford, Carnegie Mellon, and Caltech. The conversation flowed easily, and Naomi felt herself relaxing. These kids were privileged, yes, but they were also genuine and curious. They asked about her background without being judgmental, and they shared their own goals and interests freely. After school, Richard picked her up at the entrance. Sophie was awake and alert, dressed in a bright blue dress with matching shoes. When Naomi got in the car, the baby squealed with delight and reached for her. How was your first day? Richard asked as they drove away from campus. Amazing, Naomi said, taking Sophie's little hand. Really good. The classes are hard but in a good way. The teachers are incredible. And I made some friends, I think. I knew you would do great, Richard said proudly. Tell me everything. Naomi described her day in detail, the classes, the students, the conversations, the challenges. Richard listened attentively, asking questions and offering encouragement. When they reached the apartment, he walked her up as usual. Mrs. Johnson was home from her day job, cooking dinner in the kitchen. Jerome was at the table doing homework. When Naomi walked in, both of them looked up eagerly. How was it? Mrs. Johnson asked immediately. It was wonderful, Naomi said, hugging her mother. Mom, the school is incredible. The opportunities there are beyond anything I imagined. She told her family about her day while Richard played with Sophie in the living room. Mrs. Johnson listened with tears of pride in her eyes. Jerome peppered Naomi with questions about the campus and the students. Did anyone give you trouble? Mrs. Johnson asked carefully. Any issues with being the scholarship student? Not at all, Naomi assured her. If anything, people seemed impressed. Mr. Feldman told the whole class about my championship win. Some kids were actually a little intimidated. Richard joined them at the table. Naomi was amazing today. Dr. Brooks called me this afternoon to say how impressed the teachers were. She said Naomi contributed more in her first day than some students do all year. Mrs. Johnson looked at Richard with deep gratitude. Thank you for this. Thank you for believing in my daughter and giving her this chance. She's earning it, Richard said simply. I'm just opening doors. Naomi is walking through them on her own merit. Over dinner, which Richard had been invited to stay for, they talked about plans for the coming weeks. Naomi would start her work at Whitaker Systems the following Saturday. She had a manageable course load at Rosewood that would allow her to balance school and work. Richard had also arranged for a tutor to help Naomi with college application essays, though her grades and achievements spoke for themselves. I still can't believe this is real, Naomi said, looking around the table at her family and Richard. 6 months ago, I was struggling to afford a plane ticket. Now I'm at one of the best schools in the country, working at a major tech company, and planning for college like it's actually possible. It was always possible, Richard said gently. You always had the talent and the drive. You just needed someone to recognize it and provide resources. That's all I did. As Richard prepared to leave with Sophie, Jerome asked him a question. Mr. Richard, can I ask you something? Of course, Jerome. What's on your mind? Why do you spend so much time with us? You're really busy and important. Don't you have other things to do? Richard knelt down to Jerome's level, his expression serious. Jerome, spending time with your family is one of the most important things I do. Your sister helped me when I was at my lowest point. But more than that, I genuinely enjoy being with all of you. You remind me that kindness and love are what matter most in life. That's worth more than any business meeting or deal. Jerome nodded, satisfied with the answer. Then he asked another question. Can I show you my story? I finished the first chapter. I would love that, Richard said. Email it to me tonight and I'll read it before bed. I'll send you my thoughts tomorrow. After Richard left, Mrs. Johnson pulled Naomi aside. Baby, I need you to be careful. Mr. Whitaker is a good man, but he's also a very successful, attractive man who's spending a lot of time with our family. Don't let yourself develop feelings that could complicate things. Naomi blushed. Mom, it's not like that. He's my mentor. And he's way older than me. I'm 17. I know, Mrs. Johnson said. And I'm not saying he would ever do anything inappropriate. I'm just saying guard your heart. You're young and impressionable and he's been incredibly kind to us. It would be easy to confuse gratitude with other feelings. I understand, Naomi said. But really, Mom, it's fine. I'm focused on school and work. That's all. But later that night, lying in bed, Naomi thought about Richard. About his kindness, his intelligence, his gentle way with Sophie. About how safe she felt when he was around, how valued and seen. Her mother's warning echoed in her mind, and Naomi realized there was truth in it. She did feel something more than gratitude. But she pushed the thought away, telling herself it was just natural admiration for someone who had changed her life. Nothing more. In his penthouse across the city, Richard was having similar thoughts. He sat in his home office, Sophie asleep in her crib nearby, reviewing Jerome's story on his computer. But his mind kept drifting to Naomi. To her brilliant mind, her kind heart, her beautiful smile. He shook his head, frustrated with himself. She was 17, his mentee, someone who trusted and relied on him. These thoughts were inappropriate. He focused on Jerome's story, forcing himself to concentrate on the words. The boy had genuine talent, creating engaging characters and vivid scenes. Richard typed up detailed feedback, praising Jerome's strengths and offering gentle suggestions for improvement. He hit send, then closed his laptop. Walking to the window, Richard looked out at the Chicago skyline. 6 months ago, he had been drowning in grief and exhaustion. Now he felt alive again, engaged with the world in meaningful ways. The Johnson family had given him that gift. He could not let confused feelings ruin it. He would be the mentor Naomi needed, the friend her family deserved. Nothing more. But as he climbed into bed, Richard knew it would not be that simple. Feelings, once acknowledged, rarely went away just because they were inconvenient. He would have to be very careful, very respectful, very appropriate. Naomi's well-being and her family's trust mattered more than his own emotions. Time would test that resolve in ways he could not yet imagine. 2 years passed in a blur of achievement and growth. Naomi graduated from Rosewood Academy as valedictorian, her graduation speech moving the entire audience to tears as she talked about opportunity, gratitude, and the power of kindness. She was accepted to MIT with a full scholarship, along with offers from every other school she applied to. Her work at Whittaker Systems had resulted in 3 patent applications, 2 published papers, and recognition throughout the tech industry. But more importantly, Naomi had grown from a gifted but uncertain teenager into a confident young woman. She was 19 now, poised on the edge of college and full adulthood. She wore her natural hair in beautiful curls, her style more refined but still authentic. Today she wore a bright maroon dress that she had chosen for her college send-off party. Richard, now 34, watched her from across his penthouse living room, where the party was being held. Sophie, now 3 years old, was playing with Jerome and Naomi at a low table set up with crayons and paper. The little girl adored Naomi, calling her Nomi, and wanting her attention constantly. The penthouse was filled with people: Naomi's family, her friends from Rosewood, colleagues from Whittaker Systems, teachers and mentors. Mrs. Johnson moved through the crowd with quiet pride, wearing a beautiful green dress that Richard had given her as a gift. She had quit all but one job, now working as an administrator at a nonprofit that helped other single mothers. Jerome, now 14, was taller and more confident, his first novel nearing completion with help from a literary agent Richard had introduced him to. Richard's parents had flown in from California for the party. His mother, Barbara, a graceful white woman in her 60s, was talking with Mrs. Johnson near the windows. His father, Robert, a distinguished man with gray hair and sharp features, was discussing business with some of Richard's colleagues. They had embraced the Johnson family warmly, seeing how important they were to their son and granddaughter. "Richard, come over here," Naomi called, waving him to the children's table. "Sophie wants you to see her drawing." Richard walked over, his heart doing something complicated when Naomi smiled at him. This had been happening more frequently lately, these moments where his carefully controlled feelings threatened to surface. Naomi was no longer a teenager. She was a brilliant, accomplished young woman about to start college. But she was still his mentee, still someone who depended on him. The age difference, while less significant now, still existed. Sophie held up her drawing proudly. It showed 4 stick figures, 1 large, 1 small, and 2 medium-sized. "This is you, Daddy," she said, pointing to the tall figure. "And this is me. And this is Nomi. And this is Jerome." "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Richard said, kneeling beside her. "You're such a good artist." "Nomi helped me," Sophie said. "She's the best." "She really is," Richard agreed, meeting Naomi's eyes over Sophie's head. Something passed between them, a moment of connection that felt charged with unspoken feelings. Jerome noticed and glanced between them with raised eyebrows. At 14 he was perceptive enough to sense the undercurrent. He looked at his sister questioningly, but Naomi turned away, focusing on Sophie's drawing. Later in the evening, after most guests had left, Richard found himself on the balcony with Naomi. The Chicago skyline glittered before them, the summer night warm and pleasant. Sophie was asleep in her room, watched over by Maria. Inside, Mrs. Johnson was helping clean up with Richard's parents. "I can't believe I'm leaving for Boston in 2 weeks, Naomi said, leaning against the railing. "It feels surreal." "You're ready for it," Richard said, standing beside her. "MIT is lucky to have you." "I'm nervous," Naomi admitted. "What if I'm not as smart as everyone thinks? What if I get there and realize I'm out of my depth?" Richard turned to face her. "Naomi, you're one of the most brilliant people I've ever met. You've proven yourself over and over. MIT will be challenging, but you'll rise to meet it like you always do." Naomi looked at him, her expression vulnerable in a way she rarely showed. "What if I fail? What if I let everyone down? You invested so much in me, believed in me when nobody else did. What if I don't live up to that?" "You could never let me down," Richard said firmly. "Success isn't just about achievements and awards. It's about growth, learning, becoming who you're meant to be. Whatever happens at MIT, wherever life takes you, I'll be proud of you." They were quiet for a moment, the city sounds distant below them. Then Naomi spoke again, her voice softer. "Richard, can I tell you something? And will you promise to be honest with me?" "Always," Richard said, though his heart started beating faster. "Do you ever feel like there's something between us? Something more than mentor and student or friend and friend? Or am I imagining it?" Richard's breath caught. This was the conversation he had been avoiding for 2 years, the acknowledgement he feared because of what it might mean. He could lie, could pretend he did not know what she was talking about. But he had promised honesty. "I feel it," he admitted quietly. "I felt it for a while now. But Naomi, you're about to start college. You're 19. I'm 34. There's a power dynamic between us because of what I've done for you and your family. Acting on these feelings would be wrong." "Why?" Naomi challenged. "I'm an adult. I know my own mind. And you didn't create a power dynamic to manipulate me. You helped my family because you're genuinely kind. That's different." "Is it?" Richard asked. "How can you be sure your feelings aren't influenced by gratitude? By the fact that I changed your family's circumstances?" Naomi stepped closer to him. "Because I've thought about this for 2 years. I've questioned myself constantly. And I know the difference between gratitude and genuine connection. What I feel for you is real, Richard. It's not about what you've given me. It's about who you are." Richard wanted to reach for her, to pull her close and admit that he felt the same way. But responsibility held him back. "You're about to start an incredible new chapter of your life. You'll meet new people, have new experiences. What if you go to MIT and realize these feelings were just a phase? What if you meet someone your own age and realize that's what you really want? What if I don't?" Naomi countered. "What if I go to MIT and spend 4 years knowing I left something important unresolved?" "Richard, I'm not asking you to commit to anything serious right now. I'm just asking you to acknowledge that there's something here worth exploring." Richard ran his hand through his hair, torn between what he wanted and what he thought was right. "Naomi, I care about you deeply. Not just as a mentor or friend. But I need to put your well-being first. If we started something and it went wrong, it could hurt you, hurt your family, hurt Sophie. I can't risk that." "So you're saying no?" Naomi asked, her voice steady despite the hurt in her eyes. "I'm saying not now," Richard clarified. "I'm saying go to MIT. Focus on your studies and your future. Meet new people and have new experiences. If after some time has passed you still feel this way, we can revisit this conversation. But right now the most important thing is your education and your growth. I won't do anything that might compromise that." Naomi was quiet, processing his words. Finally she nodded. "Okay, I understand. And I respect your decision, even if I don't completely agree with it. But Richard, just so you know, I'm not going to change my mind. What I feel for you is real and lasting. Time isn't going to make it go away." "Then time will prove that," Richard said gently. "And if it does, if you still feel this way after you've had space to grow and explore, then we'll talk about it seriously. I promise." Naomi reached out and took his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. It was the first time they had held hands, and the contact sent electricity through Richard's body. "I'm holding you to that promise." They stood there for a moment, hands linked, both acknowledging the feelings between them while agreeing to wait. It was bittersweet and difficult but also right. Naomi needed this time to become fully herself, independent of Richard's influence. And Richard needed time to be absolutely certain that pursuing a relationship with her would be ethical and appropriate. Finally they went back inside. Mrs. Johnson looked at them with knowing eyes, but she said nothing. She trusted Richard to do the right thing, and she trusted her daughter to make wise decisions. Whatever happened between them would happen in its own time. The rest of the evening was subdued but warm. When the Johnsons left, Naomi hugged Richard tightly at the door. "Thank you for everything," she whispered. "For changing my life. For believing in me. For being honest tonight." "Thank you for being patient with me," Richard whispered back. "For understanding why we need to wait." After they left, Richard checked on Sophie, then sat in his living room with a glass of wine. His mother found him there, sitting in the dim light. "You're in love with her," Barbara said simply, sitting beside her son. Richard did not deny it. "Is it that obvious?" "To someone who knows you as well as I do, yes. And she feels the same way." "I know. She told me tonight." Barbara was quiet for a moment. "And what did you say?" Richard explained their conversation, his reasoning for waiting, his concerns about ethics and appropriateness. Barbara listened without interruption, then spoke thoughtfully. "You're doing the right thing by giving her space to grow without pressure. But Richard, don't let your sense of obligation or propriety stop you from eventually pursuing happiness. Naomi is remarkable. She's brilliant, kind, mature beyond her years. Yes, you met her when she was young, and yes, you helped her family. But that doesn't mean a relationship between you would automatically be inappropriate or problematic. Context matters." "What if people judge us?" Richard asked. "What if they think I groomed her or took advantage?" "Some people will always judge," Barbara said. But the people who know you, who know your character and your heart, will understand. You've been nothing but respectful and appropriate with Naomi. You've given her opportunities and space to become her own person. If after that you both still want to explore a relationship, that's between two adults making an informed choice. Dad would have an opinion about this, Richard said wryly. Barbara smiled. Your father is practical to a fault. But even he can see that you're happier around the Johnsons than you've been since Lauren died. He won't object to anything that brings you genuine joy. Richard hugged his mother. Thank you for understanding. That's what mothers do, Barbara said, kissing his forehead. Now get some sleep. You have a busy couple weeks ahead before Naomi leaves. The next 2 weeks were bittersweet. Richard helped Naomi prepare for college, taking her shopping for dorm supplies, helping her organize her finances, giving advice about course selection. They maintained their usual friendship, but there was a new awareness between them, an acknowledgement of deeper feelings even as they agreed to wait. Sophie was heartbroken that Naomi was leaving. The little girl did not understand why her beloved Naomi had to go so far away. Naomi spent hours explaining that she would visit often, that they could video call, that this was just a new adventure. On the day Naomi left for MIT, the entire Johnson family gathered at Richard's penthouse. He had arranged for a car service to take them to the airport, but first they wanted to say goodbye properly. Sophie clung to Naomi, crying, until Naomi promised to call that very evening. Richard walked Naomi to the elevator carrying one of her suitcases. At the doors they paused. This is it, Naomi said. The next chapter. You're going to be amazing, Richard said. MIT is lucky to have you. Don't forget about me while I'm gone, Naomi said, attempting to joke but her voice catching. Richard cupped her face gently, breaking his own rule about physical contact. I could never forget about you. You've become one of the most important people in my life, Naomi. That's not going to change because of distance. Naomi leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. I meant what I said on the balcony. I'm not going to change my mind. Then I'll be here when you're ready, Richard promised. They broke apart as the elevator arrived. Naomi stepped in, turning to face him as the doors began to close. See you soon, Richard. See you soon, Naomi. The doors closed and Richard stood alone in the hallway. His penthouse suddenly felt empty, despite Sophie's presence inside. Naomi had become such an integral part of his life that her absence left a noticeable void. But he knew this was necessary. Naomi needed this time to discover who she was outside of his influence. She needed to explore her own dreams and possibilities without feeling obligated to him or his family. And if, after all that, she still wanted what they had acknowledged on the balcony, then Richard would be ready to move forward. For now he would wait. He would support her from a distance. He would be the friend and mentor she needed while she navigated this new chapter. And he would hope that when the time was right, they could revisit the conversation that had started something neither of them could quite define yet. If you're loving Naomi and Richard's story, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss what happens next. Have you ever had to wait for something you really wanted? Was it worth it? Share your experience in the comments below. 18 months had passed since Naomi left for MIT. Richard stood in the arrivals terminal at Logan International Airport, watching passengers stream through the gates. Sophie, now 4.5 years old, bounced excitedly beside him, wearing a bright green dress with white flowers. She had been counting down the days until Naomi's holiday break with the intensity only a child can manage. Is that her daddy? Sophie asked every time she saw a young woman with dark skin. Is that Naomi? Not yet, sweetheart, Richard said patiently. We'll see her soon. When Naomi finally appeared, pulling a small suitcase behind her, Richard's breath caught. She looked different. More confident, more sophisticated. She wore her hair in elegant braids, and her style had evolved into something polished yet authentic. She wore jeans and a bright red sweater that brought out the warm tones in her skin. Sophie broke free from Richard's hand and ran toward Naomi, shouting her name. Naomi dropped her suitcase and caught the little girl, spinning her around as they both laughed. I missed you so much, Sophie said, squeezing Naomi's neck. I missed you too, sweet girl, Naomi replied, kissing her cheek. You got so big. Richard approached more slowly, giving them their moment. When Naomi looked up at him over Sophie's head, their eyes met and held. 18 months of phone calls and video chats had not prepared him for seeing her in person again. The connection between them, which had been strong before, now felt almost overwhelming. Hi, Richard, Naomi said softly. Hi, Naomi. Welcome home. They hugged carefully, aware of Sophie between them, aware of the feelings that had only grown stronger with time and distance. Richard breathed in Naomi's scent, felt the warmth of her body against his, and knew with absolute certainty that what he felt was not going away. In the car, Sophie chattered nonstop about everything Naomi had missed: her new school, her ballet classes, the stories Jerome had been reading to her. Naomi listened with genuine interest, asking questions and laughing at Sophie's animated descriptions. Richard drove, occasionally glancing in the rearview mirror at Naomi. She caught him looking once and smiled, a small, knowing smile that made his heart race. They went directly to Richard's penthouse, where Mrs. Johnson and Jerome were waiting. The reunion was joyful and loud, full of hugs and laughter and rapid-fire questions. Mrs. Johnson had cooked a feast, Naomi's favorite food spread across the dining table. Over dinner, Naomi told them about MIT. About her research in artificial intelligence, her work on neural networks, the professors who challenged and inspired her. She had maintained a perfect GPA while working part-time in a research lab. She had presented at conferences, collaborated with graduate students, and published 2 more papers. And the social life? Mrs. Johnson asked pointedly. Please tell me you've made time for friends and fun. Naomi laughed. Yes, Mom. I have friends. I go to parties sometimes. I even dated a little, though nothing serious. Richard's stomach tightened at the mention of dating, but he kept his expression neutral. Of course she had dated. She was a beautiful, brilliant young woman at a major university. It would have been strange if she had not. Anyone special? Jerome asked, grinning mischievously. No, Naomi said, her eyes flicking briefly to Richard. Nobody special. Just casual stuff. I'm too focused on my work for a serious relationship right now. The conversation moved on, but Richard felt Naomi's words settle over him like a blanket. Nobody special. Was that true, or was she saying it for his benefit? After dinner, Sophie insisted that Naomi tuck her into bed. Richard stood in the doorway of Sophie's room, watching Naomi read a bedtime story in the rocking chair with Sophie curled against her chest. The scene was so domestic, so natural, that Richard could easily imagine it being their reality. Naomi as Sophie's stepmother. Their family officially joined. The thought should have scared him, but it only felt right. After Sophie fell asleep, Naomi and Richard found themselves alone on the balcony again, just as they had been 18 months ago. The December air was cold, but they bundled in coats and stood looking out at the city lights. It's good to be home, Naomi said. I love MIT, but I miss this. Missed you and Sophie and my family. We missed you too, Richard said. The penthouse has been too quiet without your visits. They were quiet for a moment. Then Naomi spoke, her voice steady but nervous. Richard, remember the conversation we had before I left? About our feelings? Richard's pulse quickened. I remember. You said to give it time. To go to MIT to grow and explore and see if I still felt the same way. Naomi turned to face him fully. It's been 18 months. I've had time. And Richard, I need to tell you that nothing has changed. If anything, my feelings have gotten stronger. Richard met her gaze, seeing the certainty there. Tell me about it. About how you know. Naomi smiled. I dated 3 different guys at MIT. All of them were smart, age-appropriate, interested in me. One was even really sweet, someone I could see myself with under different circumstances. But every single time I found myself comparing them to you. Wishing they were you. Missing our conversations, missing the way you see the world, missing the way you make me feel safe and challenged at the same time. She stepped closer. I tried, Richard. I really tried to move on, to convince myself that what I felt for you was just gratitude or a phase or some kind of confused attachment. But it's not. It's real. You're who I think about when I wake up. You're who I want to share good news with. You're who I miss when I'm lying in bed at night. That's not going to change. Richard's heart was pounding. Everything she was saying echoed his own experience. The phone calls that brightened his entire day. The video chats he looked forward to all week. The way everything reminded him of her. The dates he had gone on that felt hollow because the women were not Naomi. I feel the same way, Richard admitted. I've tried to stay appropriate, to maintain boundaries, to be just your mentor and friend. But Naomi, you're the first thing I think about when I wake up too. You're the person I want to tell everything to. When something good happens, I want to share it with you. When something is hard, I want your perspective. You've become essential to me. So what do we do about it? Naomi asked. Because I'm not 17 anymore. I'm not your naive mentee who might be confusing feelings. I'm 20 years old. I've had space and time to figure myself out. And I know what I want. I want to see if this thing between us can be something real. Richard reached out and took her hands, intertwining their fingers like they had done once before. Are you absolutely sure? Because once we cross this line we can't go back. Our relationship will change. And if it doesn't work out, we risk losing what we have. I'm sure, Naomi said without hesitation. Are you? Richard looked at this extraordinary woman standing before him. She was brilliant, kind, strong, mature, beautiful. She knew her own mind and had proven it over 18 months of separation. The age difference, while still present, mattered less now. She was an adult, independent and self-sufficient. And what he felt for her was deeper than anything he had experienced except with Lauren. I'm sure, Richard said. But Naomi, we need to be smart about this. We need to take it slow. We need to communicate constantly. And we need to be prepared for judgment and criticism from people who don't understand our history. I can handle that, Naomi said. Can you? For you? Yes. They stood there for a moment, holding hands, the weight of their confession settling between them. Then Richard gently pulled her closer, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When she did not, when she leaned into him instead, he wrapped his arms around her and held her close. We're really doing this? Naomi whispered against his chest. We're really doing this, Richard confirmed. But slowly, carefully, with respect for everyone involved. Naomi pulled back just enough to look up at him. Can I kiss you? I've been thinking about it for 2 years. Richard's breath hitched. Yes. Naomi rose on her toes and Richard leaned down, meeting her halfway. The kiss was soft, tentative at first, both of them aware of the significance of the moment. Then it deepened, becoming more confident, more certain. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Wow, Naomi said, her eyes bright. Yeah, Richard agreed. Wow. They kissed again, longer this time, and Richard felt 2 years of restrained feelings pour into that contact. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. We should talk to your mother, Richard said. She deserves to know what's happening. And I want her blessing even though we're both adults. Naomi nodded. Tomorrow. We'll talk to her together. They went back inside, but instead of Naomi leaving immediately, she stayed for another hour. They sat on the couch, not quite cuddling but close, talking about what this new development meant. They agreed to keep their relationship private at first, to let themselves figure out what they were before facing external scrutiny. They agreed to continue prioritizing Naomi's education and Richard's responsibilities as Sophie's father. They agreed to be honest with each other about concerns and feelings. When Naomi finally left for her mother's apartment, Richard walked her to the elevator. At the doors he kissed her again, sweet and brief. Good night, Naomi. Good night, Richard. I'll see you tomorrow. After she left, Richard went to his bedroom and lay down, staring at the ceiling. He was excited, nervous, hopeful, and terrified all at once. This was either the best decision he had ever made or a mistake that would cost him dearly. But looking at Naomi, feeling what he felt when he was with her, Richard could not believe it was a mistake. The next day, Richard and Naomi sat down with Mrs. Johnson in her apartment. Jerome was at school, giving them privacy for this conversation. Mrs. Johnson listened as they explained what had developed between them, her face carefully neutral. When they finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke directly to Richard. Do you love my daughter? Yes, Richard said without hesitation. I do. Are you using her? Taking advantage of the power you have in her life? No. Never. I would never do that. Mrs. Johnson turned to Naomi. And you, baby? Are you sure about this? Sure you're not confusing gratitude with love? I'm sure, Mom, Naomi said firmly. I've spent 18 months questioning myself, testing my feelings. What I feel for Richard is real. It's not about what he's done for us. It's about who he is. Mrs. Johnson nodded slowly. I'm not going to lie. The age difference concerns me. The history concerns me. But I've watched you two together for 3 years now. I've seen how you look at each other. I've seen Richard be nothing but respectful and appropriate. And I trust both of your judgments. She looked at Richard seriously. But Mr. Whitaker, if you hurt my daughter, mentor or not, billionaire or not, I will have something to say about it. Richard smiled. I would expect nothing less, Mrs. Johnson. And I promise you, I will do everything in my power to make Naomi happy and treat her with the respect and love she deserves. Mrs. Johnson stood and hugged them both. Okay then. You have my blessing. But please be careful. The world can be cruel to relationships that don't fit traditional molds. Protect yourselves and protect what you're building. Over the next 2 weeks of Naomi's winter break, they spent as much time together as possible. They went on actual dates, Dinner at quiet restaurants, walks along the lakefront, museum visits, movies. With each date, their connection deepened. They learned each other in new ways, explored the romantic aspect of their relationship while maintaining the friendship that had always been at its core. Sophie was thrilled to have Naomi around so much, not understanding the shift but loving the attention. Jerome was supportive, having suspected their feelings for months. Mrs. Johnson watched with cautious optimism, seeing her daughter genuinely happy. When it was time for Naomi to return to MIT, the goodbye was harder than before. They stood at the airport holding each other, neither wanting to let go. "This is going to be hard," Naomi said. "Being apart. We'll make it work," Richard promised. "Video calls, visits when you have breaks, constant communication. We can do this." "I love you," Naomi said, the first time she had spoken those words aloud. "I needed to say it before I left. I love you, Richard." Richard's eyes filled with tears. "I love you too, Naomi. So much." They kissed one more time, then Naomi had to go through security. Richard watched until she disappeared from view, feeling the loss of her presence immediately. But unlike 18 months ago, this goodbye came with the promise of something real waiting on the other side. They were together now officially. And despite the distance, despite the challenges ahead, that made all the difference. The long-distance relationship was harder than either of them anticipated, but they made it work through determination and constant communication. Richard flew to Boston once a month, staying in a hotel near campus and spending weekends with Naomi. They explored the city together, studied in coffee shops, and enjoyed simple domestic moments that made their relationship feel real and grounded. Naomi flew to Chicago during breaks, splitting time between her family and Richard's penthouse. Sophie adjusted to the new dynamic with remarkable ease. At 5 years old, she accepted that Naomi and Daddy were special friends who loved each other. When Naomi was around, Sophie wanted her involved in everything: bedtime stories, breakfast making, park visits. The little girl had already started calling Naomi her bonus mom, a term that made both Richard and Naomi emotional. Mrs. Johnson remained supportive but watchful, checking in with Naomi regularly to make sure she was happy and treated well. Jerome, now 15 and working on his second novel, joked that he had predicted their relationship from the beginning. He had grown close to Richard too, seeing him as a mentor and father figure. The first real test came 6 months into their relationship, during Naomi's spring break. Richard had invited her to attend a major tech conference with him in San Francisco. It was a high-profile event where he would be speaking, and he wanted Naomi by his side as his partner, not just his employee. "Are you sure?" Naomi asked when he proposed the idea. "People will see us together. There will be questions." "I'm ready if you are," Richard said. "I'm tired of hiding what we have. You're important to me and I want the world to know it." So they went to the conference together. Richard introduced Naomi as his girlfriend and partner, not just as a researcher from his company. The reactions were mixed. Some people were supportive and congratulatory. Others whispered behind their hands, speculating about the age difference and how they had met. A few tech bloggers wrote articles questioning the appropriateness of their relationship, dredging up Naomi's history as Richard's mentee. The negative attention hurt, but it also strengthened their resolve. They held their heads high, behaving professionally in public while being affectionate in private. Richard gave his keynote speech and Naomi attended as his date, sitting in the front row and beaming with pride. That evening they attended the conference gala. Naomi wore a stunning blue dress that Richard had bought for her, and he wore a tailored black suit. They danced together, Richard holding her close as they moved to the music. "How are you doing with all the attention?" Richard asked quietly. "I'm okay," Naomi said. "It's uncomfortable but I expected it. We knew people would judge. As long as you and I know the truth about our relationship, that's what matters. The truth being that I love you and respect you, and our relationship is between equals," Richard said. "Exactly," Naomi agreed. "And the truth being that I chose this freely, with full knowledge and understanding. I'm not a victim. I'm a willing participant in something beautiful." A tech journalist approached them during a break in the dancing. She was a middle-aged white woman with sharp eyes and a recorder in her hand. "Mr. Whitaker, can I ask you a few questions about your relationship with Miss Johnson?" Richard tensed, but Naomi squeezed his hand. "Sure," he said evenly. "There's been some speculation about the appropriateness of your relationship, given that you were Miss Johnson's mentor and benefactor when she was underage. What do you say to critics who suggest there's a power imbalance?" Richard kept his voice calm. "I understand why people might have questions. But the facts are clear. I met Naomi when she was 17, and our relationship was strictly professional and mentorship-based for 3 years. During that time, I provided educational opportunities, not personal attention. Naomi and I did not begin a romantic relationship until she was 20 years old, living independently at MIT, and had proven herself as a brilliant researcher in her own right. She chose to pursue a relationship with me as an autonomous adult. There is no power imbalance because Naomi has her own career, her own achievements, and her own life. The journalist turned to Naomi. Miss Johnson, what do you say to people who suggest you're with Mr. Whitaker because of what he can provide financially? Naomi's smile was cool and confident. I would say they don't know me or understand our relationship. I was on full scholarship at MIT before Richard and I started dating. I have my own research position, my own publications, my own reputation in the field. I don't need Richard's money or connections. I'm with him because I love him as a person, because he's kind and intelligent and treats me as an equal. Our relationship is built on mutual respect and genuine affection, not financial dependency. The journalist seemed disappointed that her questions had not produced the drama she wanted. She thanked them and walked away. Richard and Naomi looked at each other and laughed. That was our first real public challenge, Naomi said. We handled it pretty well. You handled it perfectly, Richard corrected. You were poised and articulate. I'm so proud of you. Over the following months, the public scrutiny gradually faded as people found new topics to discuss. Richard and Naomi settled into a rhythm that worked for them, focused on their own relationship, supportive of each other's careers, and increasingly confident in their choice to be together. Naomi continued excelling at MIT. She was selected for an exclusive research program focusing on machine learning applications in healthcare. Her work was getting recognized internationally, with invitations to speak at conferences and collaborate with leading researchers. She was building a reputation completely separate from Richard's influence, proving to herself and others that she was successful on her own merits. Richard's company was thriving too. He had launched a new division focused on ethical AI development, with Naomi consulting on the project remotely. Sophie started kindergarten and was flourishing, a happy, confident child who loved learning and making friends. For Naomi's 21st birthday, Richard planned something special. He flew her entire family to Chicago and rented out a private room at an upscale restaurant. The guest list included Mrs. Johnson, Jerome, Richard's parents, close friends from both their lives, and colleagues who had supported them. When Naomi walked into the room, wearing a bright green dress that complemented her skin beautifully, she gasped at seeing everyone gathered. The room erupted in cheers and applause. "Happy birthday," Richard said, kissing her cheek. "You deserve to be celebrated." The evening was magical. People gave speeches honoring Naomi's achievements and character. Jerome read a poem he had written about his sister. Mrs. Johnson shared stories from Naomi's childhood, making everyone laugh and cry. Richard's mother welcomed Naomi officially as part of their family. Then Richard stood to give his toast. He looked at Naomi, his heart full of love and gratitude. 2.5 years ago, I was on a plane with my crying daughter, feeling like a complete failure as a father. Then this remarkable young woman walked up to me and changed everything. Naomi, you saved me that day. Not just by calming Sophie, but by reminding me that kindness and brilliance and genuine human connection are what matter most in life. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. Watching you grow into the woman you are today has been one of the greatest privileges of my life. You're an exceptional mathematician, a talented researcher, a loving daughter and sister, an incredible partner, and a wonderful bonus mother to Sophie. You make me want to be better. You make the world brighter just by being in it. Happy birthday, Naomi. I love you more than words can express. The room applauded as Richard kissed Naomi, who was crying happy tears. She stood and hugged him tightly. Thank you, she whispered. For everything. For believing in me. For loving me. For being patient with me. Thank you. Later that night, after the party ended and everyone had gone home, Richard and Naomi sat in his penthouse living room. Sophie was asleep in her room, and the city lights twinkled outside the windows. Naomi was curled against Richard's side, his arm around her shoulders. This has been the best birthday of my life, Naomi said contentedly. You deserve every bit of happiness, Richard replied, kissing the top of her head. Naomi was quiet for a moment, then said, Richard, I've been thinking about something. About the future. What about it? Well, I have one more year at MIT. Then I'll graduate with my bachelor's degree. I've been accepted into MIT's graduate program, which is amazing. But I've also been thinking about other options. Richard felt a flutter of nervousness. What kind of options? There are excellent graduate programs in Chicago, Naomi said carefully. Northwestern has a top-tier AI research program. University of Chicago has one too. I could transfer my credits and continue my graduate work here. Be closer to you and Sophie. Be closer to my mom and Jerome. Richard's heart leaped, but he forced himself to think about what was best for Naomi. MIT's program is the best in the country. You shouldn't compromise your education to be near me. It wouldn't be a compromise, Naomi argued. Chicago's programs are excellent too. And Richard, I'm tired of the distance. I'm tired of only seeing you once a month. I want to be part of your daily life. Part of Sophie's daily life. I want to have dinner with you after work and wake up next to you and be a real family. Are you sure? Richard asked. This is a big decision. You need to be certain it's what you want, not what you think I want. I'm sure, Naomi said firmly. I've given this a lot of thought. MIT has been incredible, but it's time for the next chapter. And I want that chapter to be in Chicago with you. Richard pulled her closer, overwhelmed with happiness. Then yes, come home to Chicago. Let's build our life together properly. They kissed and it felt like a promise. A commitment to their shared future, to the family they were creating together. The next year passed quickly. Naomi finished her final year at MIT with honors, graduating with multiple awards and a thesis that was published in a prestigious journal. She was accepted into Northwestern's graduate program with full funding and a research assistantship. Richard's company expanded, opening 2 new offices and hiring hundreds of employees. Sophie turned 6 and was reading at a 3rd grade level, showing early signs of being academically gifted like her bonus mother. Jerome, now 16, finished his 2nd novel and signed with a publishing house. His first book was set to be released the following year, a young adult science fiction story that had already generated buzz in the literary community. Mrs. Johnson was promoted to director at her nonprofit, her hard work and dedication finally being recognized. She was dating someone, a kind man named Thomas who treated her like the queen she was. Everything was falling into place. Everyone was thriving. And Richard and Naomi were happier than either of them had imagined possible. On the day Naomi officially moved to Chicago, Richard helped her unpack boxes in the apartment he had helped her lease near Northwestern's campus. It was a nice 1-bedroom in a safe neighborhood, close to both the university and his penthouse. This is really happening, Naomi said, looking around at her new space. We're really in the same city now. Finally, Richard agreed, wrapping his arms around her from behind. No more long distance. Just us figuring out life together. Naomi turned in his arms and kissed him. I love you, Richard Whittaker. I love you too, Naomi Johnson. More than you'll ever know. They spent the rest of the day setting up her apartment, ordering takeout for dinner, and planning their new routine. Sophie would spend weekends at Naomi's place sometimes. They would have regular date nights. They would continue supporting each other's careers while building something lasting and real. That evening, as they sat on Naomi's new couch eating Chinese food and watching TV, Richard felt a contentment he had not experienced since Lauren died. He had found love again, unexpected and perfect. And this time he was going to do everything in his power to make it last. Life in Chicago together was everything they had hoped for and more complicated than they had anticipated. Naomi threw herself into her graduate studies at Northwestern, quickly becoming one of the top students in the program. Her research focused on ethical AI development, specifically addressing bias in machine learning algorithms. She published regularly, presented at conferences, and worked part-time at Whittaker Systems in a more senior role than before. But balancing graduate school, work, relationship, and family was exhausting. Some weeks, Naomi barely had time to sleep, let alone maintain the connections that mattered most to her. Richard tried to be supportive and understanding, but he struggled too. Running a major company while being a single father and maintaining a relationship required careful juggling. Their first major fight happened 6 months after Naomi moved to Chicago. Richard had planned a special weekend trip to a lakeside resort for the 3 of them, wanting quality time together as a family unit. But at the last minute, Naomi had to cancel because her research advisor scheduled an important meeting that could not be rescheduled. Richard tried to hide his disappointment, but Sophie was heartbroken. She cried that Naomi was breaking her promise, that she did not love them anymore. Richard had to console his daughter while simultaneously feeling frustrated with Naomi for prioritizing work over family. When Naomi came over that evening after her meeting, Richard was cool and distant. Naomi noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Sophie was really upset that you canceled," Richard said, trying to keep his voice neutral. She's been looking forward to this trip for weeks. I know, and I feel terrible about it, Naomi said. But Richard, you know how important my research is. I couldn't skip this meeting. My entire dissertation depends on this advisor's support. I understand that, Richard replied. But Naomi, relationships require time and attention too. Sophie needs you. I need you. And lately it feels like your work always comes first. Naomi's expression hardened. That's not fair. You of all people should understand career demands. You miss things with Sophie all the time because of work. That's different. I'm her father. I have to provide for her. And I have to build my career, Naomi shot back. Or do you expect me to just be available whenever you need me, like some kind of accessory to your life? The words hung in the air, sharp and painful. Richard realized they were having their first real argument, and he hated it. That's not what I meant, he said more gently. I just miss you. We see each other less now than when you were in Boston. You're always working or studying. When we're together, you're exhausted. This isn't what I imagined. Naomi's anger faded, replaced by exhaustion. I'm doing the best I can, Richard. Graduate school is brutal. I'm trying to prove myself, to build something that's entirely mine. But I'm also trying to be present for you and Sophie. It's hard. It's really hard. Richard crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. I know. I'm sorry for getting frustrated. We're both under a lot of pressure. They held each other, the fight diffusing into understanding. They talked late into the night about expectations and boundaries, about how to balance their individual needs with their relationship needs. They agreed to schedule regular date nights that were non-negotiable, to communicate better about conflicts, to extend grace when life got overwhelming. The conversation was difficult but necessary. It deepened their relationship, forcing them to confront the reality that love alone was not enough. They had to actively work at maintaining their connection. The next major challenge came from an unexpected source: academia. Naomi's research advisor, Dr. Martin Sheffield, was a renowned expert in AI ethics, a white man in his 60s with impeccable credentials and significant influence. He had seemed supportive of Naomi at first, praising her work and giving her access to important research projects. But 6 months into her program, his attitude shifted. He began dismissing her ideas in meetings, crediting her contributions to other team members, and making subtle comments about her relationship with Richard. Must be nice having a billionaire boyfriend to fall back on if academia doesn't work out, he said once during a lab meeting, his tone joking but his eyes cold. Naomi felt the comment like a slap. Her colleagues shifted uncomfortably, but nobody said anything. She kept her composure, finished the meeting, and then went home and cried in frustration. When she told Richard about the incident, his face darkened with anger. That's completely inappropriate. He's creating a hostile environment. You should report him. And say what? Naomi asked bitterly. That he made one comment? He'll say he was joking. And then he'll make my life miserable. Richard, he controls my dissertation. He controls my academic future. I can't risk antagonizing him. Richard wanted to fix it, to use his influence and resources to protect Naomi. But she made him promise not to interfere. This was her battle and she needed to fight it on her own terms. Over the following months, Dr. Sheffield's behavior worsened. He delayed approving Naomi's dissertation proposal, claiming it needed more work despite other faculty members praising it. He excluded her from important meetings and research opportunities. He made comments about affirmative action and suggested that Naomi's accomplishments were due to her race and gender, not her abilities. Naomi endured it with quiet dignity, documenting everything while continuing to produce excellent work. She found allies among other faculty members and graduate students who had witnessed Dr. Sheffield's behavior. She connected with the university's diversity office and learned about formal complaint procedures. Finally, when Dr. Sheffield publicly humiliated her during a department presentation, criticizing her methodology in front of visiting scholars and implying she did not understand basic statistical concepts, Naomi had enough. She filed a formal complaint with the university, supported by detailed documentation and witness statements from colleagues. The investigation was thorough and uncomfortable. Naomi had to relive every incident, defend her work, and face skepticism from administrators who questioned whether she was being too sensitive. But she held firm, presenting clear evidence of a pattern of discriminatory behavior. Richard supported her through it all, never pushing, just being present. He attended meetings when she asked, provided legal resources when needed, and offered comfort when the stress became overwhelming. Sophie made cards and drawings to cheer up Naomi, not understanding the details but knowing her bonus mother was going through something hard. After 3 months, the university reached a conclusion. Dr. Sheffield was found to have created a hostile environment for Naomi and other students. He was required to take sensitivity training, removed as Naomi's advisor, and barred from supervising female students or students of color for 2 years. Naomi was assigned a new advisor, Dr. Patricia Kim, a Korean-American woman who was brilliant, supportive, and genuinely interested in Naomi's research. Under Dr. Kim's guidance, Naomi's work flourished. Her dissertation proposal was approved immediately, and she began making rapid progress on her research. The experience, while painful, taught Naomi valuable lessons about standing up for herself, about the importance of documentation and allies, and about the reality that even in progressive academic spaces, discrimination still existed. She emerged stronger, more confident, and more determined than ever to succeed. Meanwhile, Richard faced his own challenges. A competitor launched an aggressive campaign to discredit Whitaker Systems, claiming the company was using unethical AI practices. The accusations were false, but they generated negative press and spooked some investors. Richard had to work long hours fighting the allegations, providing evidence of his company's ethical standards and reassuring clients. The stress took a toll on him, making him short-tempered and exhausted. He leaned on Naomi for support, and she was there for him just as he had been there for her. Together, they navigated these professional storms while maintaining their relationship and their commitments to Sophie and their families. It was not easy, but they learned that facing challenges together made them stronger as a couple. 1 year after Naomi moved to Chicago on the anniversary of their first kiss, Richard planned a special evening. He arranged for Maria to watch Sophie overnight and made reservations at the restaurant where they had their first official date. Over dinner, Richard took Naomi's hands across the table. "This year has been one of the hardest of my life. But it's also been one of the best. Do you know why?" Naomi smiled. "Why?" "Because I've had you beside me. Through every challenge, every stress, every moment of doubt. You've been my partner in the truest sense. We've faced things together and we've come through stronger. That's what real love is. Not just the happy moments but the hard ones too." "I feel the same way," Naomi said. "This year has tested us in ways I didn't expect. But I never doubted us, Richard. Not once. What we have is real and lasting." They finished dinner and walked along the lakefront, holding hands under the stars. The future felt bright and full of possibility. They had proven to themselves and each other that their relationship could weather storms. Now it was time to think about what came next. The rest of that year brought more triumphs than challenges. Naomi's research gained international recognition, with major tech companies requesting consultations on implementing her bias reduction algorithms. Richard's company not only survived the false accusations but emerged stronger, with new clients who appreciated their commitment to ethical AI. Sophie thrived in school, excelling in math and science like her bonus mother. She told everyone that Naomi was going to be her real mom someday, speaking with the absolute certainty that only children possess. Jerome's second novel was published to critical acclaim, and he was already working on a third. Mrs. Johnson and Thomas got married in a small, beautiful ceremony surrounded by family and friends. Naomi was her mother's maid of honor, and Richard gave away the bride since Mrs. Johnson's father had passed years ago. It was a day full of joy and tears, celebrating love finding its way even after hardship. As Naomi approached the completion of her doctoral program, she and Richard talked seriously about their future. They had been together for nearly 3 years and both knew where they were heading. But Richard wanted to do things right, to honor Naomi properly and make their commitment official. He began planning something special, something that would honor their journey and celebrate the family they had become. 2 years later, Naomi stood in the research lab at Whitaker Systems, presenting her findings to a room full of executives and engineers. She was 24 now, about to defend her doctoral dissertation at Northwestern. Her research had made waves in the AI community, offering innovative solutions to algorithmic bias that major tech companies were already implementing. She wore a bright blue blazer over a white blouse, her natural hair styled in an elegant updo. She moved through her presentation with confidence and clarity, fielding complex questions with ease. Richard watched from the back of the room, his heart bursting with pride. When the presentation ended, the room erupted in applause. Dr. Patel, now Whitaker Systems Chief Technology Officer, approached Naomi with a huge smile. "Naomi, that was outstanding. We want to offer you a full-time position as Senior AI Research Director once you complete your dissertation. The salary and benefits package is in this folder." Naomi opened the folder and her eyes widened. The offer was generous, more than fair, reflecting her actual value to the company rather than any favoritism due to her relationship with Richard. She had earned this position through her work, her innovations, her proven contributions. "I accept," Naomi said, shaking Dr. Patel's hand. "Thank you for this opportunity." After everyone left, Richard approached her, his expression warm. "Congratulations. That presentation was incredible." "Thank you," Naomi said, hugging him. "And thank you for not interfering. For letting me build my career on my own merit." "You've never needed my interference," Richard said. "You're brilliant all on your own." That evening they celebrated with both families at Richard's penthouse. Mrs. Johnson, now remarried to Thomas and glowing with happiness, toasted her daughter's achievements. Jerome, now 18 and a published author with his first book doing well, gave a speech about how his sister had always inspired him to chase big dreams. Sophie, now 8 years old and in 3rd grade, presented Naomi with a handmade card. Inside she had written in careful letters, "Dear Naomi, I'm so proud of you. You're the smartest person I know and the best bonus mom ever. I love you. Love, Sophie." Naomi read the card and burst into tears, pulling Sophie into a tight hug. "I love you too, sweet girl. So much." Richard watched this exchange, his mind made up about something he had been planning for months. Tonight was not the right night, but soon. Very soon. 3 weeks later, Naomi successfully defended her dissertation. The defense was attended by faculty, fellow students, friends, and family. She answered every question posed by her committee with precision and insight. When the committee unanimously voted to accept her dissertation, the room erupted in celebration. Dr. Kim hugged Naomi tightly. "You did it, Dr. Naomi Johnson. I'm so proud of you." The words washed over Naomi like a blessing. Dr. Naomi Johnson. She had done it. Against all odds, despite every obstacle, she had earned her doctorate from one of the best universities in the country. And she had done it on her own merit, with her own hard work and brilliant mind. The celebration afterward was joyful and loud. Richard could barely get close to Naomi, she was surrounded by so many well-wishers. But when their eyes met across the room, he smiled and mouthed, "I love you." She smiled back, mouthing, "I love you too." That night, after everyone had gone home, Richard and Naomi sat on his balcony. It was May and the weather was perfect. Sophie was asleep inside, exhausted from the day's excitement. "Dr. Johnson," Richard said, testing out the title. "It has a nice ring to it." Naomi laughed. "It feels surreal. Like I'm living someone else's life." "It's your life," Richard corrected. "You earned every bit of it." They were quiet for a moment, comfortable in each other's presence. Then Richard spoke again. "Naomi, do you remember the day we met? On that plane?" "Of course. How could I forget? I was at my lowest point. Exhausted, grieving, feeling like a complete failure. Then you appeared and changed everything. You gave me hope again. You gave me purpose. You reminded me that life could still hold joy and meaning." Naomi reached for his hand. "You changed my life too. You saw potential in me that I didn't even see in myself. You opened doors I didn't know existed. You believed in me." "I still believe in you," Richard said. "And I want to keep believing in you, supporting you, loving you for the rest of my life." Something in his tone made Naomi's breath catch. Richard stood and pulled her to her feet. Then, to her shock, he knelt down on one knee. "Richard," Naomi whispered, her hands flying to her mouth. Richard pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and opened it. Inside was a stunning ring, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds, elegant and unique. "Naomi Johnson, you are the most brilliant, kind, strong, beautiful woman I have ever known. You make me want to be better. You make Sophie's life richer and fuller. You make our family complete. I love you more than I can express. Will you marry me?" Naomi stared at him, at the ring, tears streaming down her face. She had dreamed of this moment but had not let herself expect it. They had been so focused on her education, on building their careers, on taking things slowly. For a brief moment she hesitated. Not because she doubted her answer, but because the magnitude of the moment overwhelmed her. This was Richard, the man who had saved her and her family. The man who had loved her patiently and selflessly. The man who had become her best friend, her partner, her love. Saying yes meant committing to a lifetime together, to all the joys and challenges that would bring. But even as these thoughts flashed through her mind, Naomi knew her answer. She had always known. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, Richard. I will marry you." Richard stood and slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, pouring years of love and patience into that contact. When they finally pulled apart, both were crying and laughing at the same time. They heard a sound and turned to see Sophie standing at the balcony door in her pajamas, her eyes wide. "Did Nomi say yes?" Sophie asked hopefully. "She said yes," Richard confirmed, grinning. Sophie squealed and ran to them, and they both knelt down to hug her. "Does this mean Nomi will be my real mom now?" "If you want me to be," Naomi said, kissing Sophie's forehead. "I would be honored to be your real mom." "I want that," Sophie said firmly. "I want you to be my mom forever." The three of them held each other, their little family now officially committing to forever together. Over the following days they shared the news with everyone. Mrs. Johnson cried happy tears and hugged Richard, thanking him for loving her daughter so completely. Jerome was thrilled, joking that he would write a best-selling romance novel based on their love story. Richard's parents were delighted, welcoming Naomi officially as their daughter-in-law. They planned a wedding for the following spring, giving them time to organize something beautiful that reflected both their families and their journey. Naomi wanted her mother and Jerome deeply involved. Richard wanted Sophie to be a flower girl. They both wanted a celebration that honored where they came from and where they were going. But Richard had one more surprise planned. On the 5th anniversary of the day they met, Richard arranged for them to go to O'Hare Airport. Naomi was confused about why they were going to the airport when they had no travel plans, but she trusted Richard and went along with it. They arrived at the international terminal, the same place where their story had begun 5 years ago. Richard led Naomi to a specific spot near the arrivals area. "This is where I was standing when you walked up to me," Richard said. "Right here." With Sophie crying in my arms and me feeling completely helpless. Naomi looked around, remembering that day. She had been 17, nervous about the math competition, worried about money, uncertain about her future. And then she had heard a baby crying and seen a man who needed help. "And I was standing over there," Naomi said, pointing. "In economy class seating area. I watched you walk back and forth and I counted Sophie's crying patterns." "You saved us that day," Richard said. "Both of us. And you've been saving us every day since." "You saved me too," Naomi replied. "You gave me opportunities one never dreamed possible. You loved me when I didn't think I deserved to be loved like that." Richard pulled her close. "We saved each other. That's what the best partnerships do." They stood there for a moment, remembering and honoring their beginning. Then Richard gestured, and Naomi noticed for the first time that their families were there. Mrs. Johnson and Thomas, Jerome, Richard's parents, Sophie, Maria, and several close friends. They all held signs and balloons, watching with huge smiles. Sophie ran forward carrying a small gift bag. "This is for you, Mommy," she said, using the title she had started using after the engagement. Naomi knelt down and took the bag, tears already forming. Inside was a small frame with a photo from that day 5 years ago. Someone had taken a picture of teenage Naomi holding baby Sophie on the plane, both of them calm and peaceful. Below the photo, Sophie had written in her careful handwriting, "The day our family started. I love you, Mommy." Naomi hugged Sophie tightly, crying openly now. Then she stood and hugged Richard, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of this gesture. Their families gathered around them, and someone suggested taking a group photo. They all posed together in the same spot where Richard and Naomi had first met, their combined families now one unit, bound by love and gratitude and hope. As they smiled for the camera, Sophie tugged on Naomi's hand. "Mommy, look." Naomi looked down at Sophie, who was grinning mischievously. Then Sophie spoke clearly and carefully, saying more words together than she ever had before. "I'm so happy you're going to be my mommy forever. You're the best person in the whole world and I love you more than anything." The group went silent, stunned. Sophie had always been verbal, but this was different. This was a complete, heartfelt speech from an 8-year-old who had just expressed exactly what everyone was feeling. Naomi burst into tears again and Richard joined her this time. They both knelt and hugged Sophie, their daughter, their miracle, the child who had brought them together and now completed their family. "I love you too, Sophie," Naomi whispered. So much. Being your mommy is the greatest honor of my life." The group erupted in applause and cheers. Jerome was crying, which he tried to hide but failed. Mrs. Johnson was sobbing into Thomas's shoulder. Richard's parents were holding each other, moved by the beauty of this moment. As the celebration continued around them, Richard took Naomi's hand and squeezed it gently. She looked at him, and everything they had been through passed between them in that glance. The challenges, the judgments, the hard work, the patience, the love. It had all led to this moment, This perfect ending that was really just the beginning of their forever. "Thank you," Richard said quietly. "For taking a chance on a desperate man with a crying baby 5 years ago. For seeing past the chaos to what we could become." "Thank you," Naomi replied. "For recognizing my worth. For giving me opportunities. For loving me so completely. For being the man I always hoped existed but never thought I'd find." They kissed and their families cheered again. Sophie wedged herself between them, giggling, and they pulled her into the embrace. Their little family of 3, soon to be official, surrounded by the love and support of everyone who mattered. 5 years ago, on a plane crossing the Atlantic, a billionaire and a teenage math genius from opposite worlds had collided in a moment of crisis. Neither could have imagined where that moment would lead. But through kindness, patience, respect, and genuine love, they had built something beautiful and lasting. Their story was unconventional. It had faced skepticism and judgment and obstacles. But it was also proof that real love can emerge from the most unexpected places, that taking chances on people pays off in ways you cannot predict, and that the greatest journeys often begin with a single act of kindness. As they left the airport together, Richard carrying Sophie on his shoulders and Naomi walking beside them, their future stretched out bright and promising. They would face challenges certainly. Life always brought challenges. But they would face them together as partners, as equals, as a family. And that made all the difference.